Now that the Xbox full screen experience is out of beta and no longer exclusive to the Xbox ROG Ally X, the gap between this year's heavyweight mainstream PC handhelds has become even harder to define, especially now that Legion Space is directly integrated in the game bar as on the Ally with Armory Crate. Now, after spending extensive time with each, I can confidently say this: the debate is no longer about performance, because they trade blows back and forth like you wouldn't believe. At this point, it really comes down to the physical hardware and the way you prefer to game on a handheld. One device leans into versatility, flexibility, and a premium gaming experience pushed further than ever before, while the other prioritizes comfort, high ergonomics, lighter weight, and has slightly better power efficiency given the smaller screen size, resolution, and display technology. But spoiler alert, by the end of this video, I'm not going to sugarcoat it or dance around the fact that while these shiny new handhelds have been amazing, I do believe that there's another handheld entirely that's probably better suited for the majority of users today. But I've really been enjoying my time with the Go 2 and the Xbox Ally so far without heavily modifying the stock setup, and a whole lot of that has to do with FSE. It's made the early dog days of gaming on Windows much more bearable, and I think the fact that I've yet to dual boot either of these machines is a huge testament to what FSE can deliver for Windows PC gaming. Now, there's obviously no dedicated Xbox button on the Legion Go 2, so I have those remapped to the additional lower buttons on the left controller. This is a really good workaround, but I really wish Lenovo would allow the actual Legion button to be remapped, because that would be the perfect Xbox bar trigger. And before I get into any of the negatives surrounding FSE, I just want to say that the fact that FSE was even brought into existence is a huge win. And thank you, Valve, for applying the pressure, because I honestly don't think Microsoft would have ever put any respect on the PC handheld gaming sector if it weren't for Valve's great success in the space. Overall, FSE is without a doubt a welcomed addition, and that I certainly wouldn't ever want to use any Windows-based handheld again going forward without it. I love how it blows everything up so it's much more legible on a smaller display and easier to navigate with the controller. And it really does seem like the system is less strained and more focused on the task at hand when a specific game is launched. But when I first heard about this collaboration between Xbox and Asus, and marketing phrases like "this is an Xbox," I have to be honest, I envisioned this would be a total rework of the entire Windows OS from top to bottom in a way that similarly mirrors the traditional Xbox console user interface. But rather than a rework or reimagining of Windows 11, FSE is unfortunately a beautiful simulation, and by that, I mean that it merely simulates a true console interface and primarily functions as a glorified front end. Yes, it's capable of aggregating your game libraries, storefronts, and game launchers, but when a simple task arises, such as pairing a new Bluetooth headset, you'll quickly find yourself rerouted to the ominous and dreadful beast lurking behind the scenes that goes by Windows. And so, in a way, with this new setup, you'll find yourself essentially juggling two independent front ends layered on top of a Windows desktop. You have your native Armory Crate or Legion Space, plus FSE, plus Windows Desktop in the background that demands your attention for system updates and can even slow your games down without warning if you activate auto updates on the system level. The Ally especially has a lot going on with this configuration, as you're still relying on Armory Crate for performance adjustments and controller mapping. You then have My Aces, which is its own dedicated app required for handling driver updates and system diagnostics. On top of that, you obviously have the full screen experience, and then of course Windows always lurking in the background. So while Aces is generally more on top of driver update rollouts, I've always appreciated that Legion Space operates as a one-stop shop for performance adjustments as well as driver updates. There's also this gamepad lock that Aces continues to impose on Armory Crate software across all handhelds, where you must switch between gamepad and desktop modes manually because auto gamepad mode is extremely unreliable. And why Aces made the decision to completely flip the Armory Crate buttons is a real head scratcher as well. Another head scratcher on Lenovo's side is the decision to place the audio auxiliary port at the bottom of the device. Frankly, I think this is a huge miss. We have a great sturdy aluminum kickstand to help offset the weight when fatigue sets in, but how in the world is this supposed to work in practical terms? And a right angle adapter doesn't fully solve this issue either. Over the course of gaming with FSE, I've also noticed consistently that some games will stubbornly open a second window upon launch, which actually happens more frequently than I expected, especially when launching games from Steam. I'll launch a game and find myself just staring at a black screen, only to recall that I need to navigate over to a second window that has popped up and is covertly hidden behind FSE's full screen takeover. There's a lot of little bugs like this that will surface in spite of FSE, but what's most egregious is how ineffective and inconsistent sleep mode is. For crying out loud, this is like the #1 reason people opt for Linux over Windows. Putting your device in sleep mode and then into a bag just feels like a death wish. The device continues to wake up randomly, the fans keep spinning, and it's honestly just a complete disaster. But thank God there is a slight glimmer of hope in the form of Hibernate. Hibernate has been much more reliable and stable in my experience for these handhelds running on Windows 11. The device will take 10 to 20 seconds to wake up, but for all intents and purposes, battery draw appears to be virtually non-existent, and games truly will boot up right where you left them. But with all that said, the trouble with Windows, or rather I should say the frustration with Windows, even in spite of FSE, is that it can drive you crazy, but it can also provide great benefits to the point when you find yourself stuck in the middle, somewhere in between disdain and appreciation. On top of wider software compatibility and anti-cheat compatibility, Windows also has a serious leg up over SteamOS when it comes to HDR. When HDR is calibrated properly on the system level for the Go 2, which involves lowering the screen brightness to 43% before you start the calibration process, HDR will be extremely consistent. And if you're running an older game that utilizes DirectX 11 or 12 that doesn't have native HDR support, you, sir, are in luck because Windows Auto HDR has your back. And when you're able to get older games running Auto HDR, it really lights a flame under your library. I've even gone back to replay some old goodies just to marvel at the beautiful display. Games like Assassin's Creed Origins, Arkham City, Dying Light, Killer Instinct, Ghostbusters Remastered, Assassin's Creed, and World War Z. Now, there are a few hacks that you can try on the Linux side, but there's no real official way to go about it, and results can vary pretty widely. Now, I had no idea that the Legion Go 2 display was going to be this good. My OLED portable monitor can't hold a candle to this display. HDR is just the chef's kiss. I know everybody talks about Ori and the Will of the Wisp, but so far, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is just one of those games that I've been really impressed by when it comes to HDR showcase. Now, when it comes to the Xbox ROG Ally X, on the other hand, it's a very solid screen. 1080p VRR, IPS, native landscape, but it's not changed in 3 years. The size, the resolution, or the panel technology. And so for me, there just wasn't a whole lot to get excited about over previous iterations, other than obviously a moderate performance boost. Honestly, I would not have been mad at Asus if they had kept the very same resolution and display panel technology, but simply brought the overall size to 8 inches at minimum. Instead, we get the same 7-inch display, which is now slightly angled upward. Now, I've tried to get used to this new design, but I have to be honest about it. I'm just not a huge fan. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it makes it more difficult to see the screen when it's lying flat. Maybe I'm running some updates or downloading some games. I like to lie it flat and kind of glance over here and there, and it just makes it more difficult to actually see the screen. On the other hand, the front-firing speakers are absolutely incredible. The Xbox ROG Ally X is the best sounding handheld I have ever used to date, and it has now become the standard that all PC handheld manufacturers should strive for. The speakers are so loud and crisp, and the soundstage feels incredibly full. I don't know what they're doing, what the wizardry is over there, but boy, it really shows. But I gotta switch gears now. It's a good thing that the speakers are so good, because all of the face buttons are so darn loud. Why are they so loud? I play this thing in the evening and wake up the entire house. The Go 2 speakers have also been improved over its predecessor But unfortunately, the audio experience continues to be confined within the design of the speakers, firing up towards the ceiling rather than directly at your face. That said, I'm not so sure I'll be willing to relinquish the detachable controllers in order to have front-firing speakers. Now, the Legion Go 2 does not shy away from buttons. They are all over this unit, but I really do appreciate the 2 additional buttons that have been added to the top of each of the controllers, which really opens up the possibilities. I also have to take a quick second to give Lenovo props for these all new rounded out controllers and for the overall haptic improvement. There's no more general buzzing for the Legion Go controllers. Haptics are much more precise and deliberate, and overall, it just adds to the immersion experience in addition to that massive display. However, these detachable controllers unfortunately still carry over a major gripe from the original. Over time, these controllers will start to have more play or wiggle than I would like, and it's the reason I installed Velcro strips on both sides of the console body, just as I did with the OG. This will give you a much tighter fit without losing the detachment component. Alternatively, you can slap on a full body protection grip case, and this will give you a much more solid feel in the hand. But this case hugs the Go 2 tighter than your true love, so removing it is a bit of a hassle, which means that detachment of the controllers is largely forfeited by going this route. So I actually cut off the controller portions for a second grip case, and I attached 3D printed grips on the Go 2 controllers for added grip and protection, alongside a textured skin that's actually designed for the OG Legion Go. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done for now, and overall it's a good temporary solution until hopefully we get some more third-party options. Maybe a kill switch will become a thing if we do see a Legion Go 2 SteamOS model. Anyway, cutting this grip case will affect the integrity, so you'll need to use some double-sided tape to ensure it stays in place firmly. The Xbox ROG Ally haptics are also extremely good, and I do like the addition of the controller grips from an ergonomic standpoint, though I don't love how it looks aesthetically. It's kind of giving off that PlayStation Portal kind of vibe. So I put together a couple of graphs for 6 of my main PC handheld drivers to gauge performance across the board per TDP. And as you can see, we have a combination of full screen experience, Bazzite, and the official SteamOS, which is indicated per unit in the legend. We'll kick things off with Cyberpunk 2077 with the resolution of 720p, DeX settings, FSR set to performance, and no frame generation. As mentioned earlier, you're going to see a lot of back and forth between the Lenovo Legion Go 2 and the Xbox ROG Ally. But one of the key factors I wanted to point out immediately is that the Z2E handhelds are no longer sluggish out of the gate at lower TDP levels, as they've been in the past for previous models. So that means that the DeC OLED is no longer the king of 10 to 15 watts. Okay, so for this next slide, still sticking with Cyberpunk at 720p, but we now have frame gen enabled. The Go 2 and Xbox Ally are very competitive from start to finish, but the Go 2 does slightly pull ahead at 30 watts and up. Cyberpunk 1080p, no frame gen. The DeC drops out of the race, but we're still using that Steam Deck graphics preset. The Ally narrowly comes out on top from 15 to 20 watts, while the Go 2 pulls ahead at 25 watts and onward. 1080p with frame gen added on, the Ally inched out the Go 2 at pretty much all TDP levels, but interestingly enough, the OG ROG Ally actually led the Z1E group until 25 watts. Alright, moving over to Shadow of the Tomb Raider at a resolution of 720p. Graphics are low, and this game does not utilize FSR or frame gen. Similar story for the two heavyweights. The Xbox Ally nudges out the Go 2 from 10 watts to 20 watts, but then the Go 2 thereafter pulls ahead. The Legion Go S SteamOS edition slightly nudged out the OG Go and the OG ROG Ally. Alright, switching over to Shadow of the Tomb Raider at a 1080p resolution. Now, I ran this benchmark a bunch of times because the Legion Go 2 was continuously gaining a sizable advantage over the Xbox ROG Ally, so I wanted to be sure that it wasn't a fluke. But at the end of the day, at max TDP levels for each subsequent unit, the Go 2 put out 10 FPS more than the Xbox ROG Ally, as you can see. The Legion Go S SteamOS model was really impressive here as well, even beating out the two Z2E handhelds at 40 TDP to their max 35 watt TDP. So clearly, performance alone is not a significant determining factor when deciding on either of these Z2E devices. And honestly, I like the idea of being able to place performance aside for once, so the focus can squarely be placed on the hardware, the software, and the overall user experience. You could argue that these factors are just as, if not more important than raw performance, because the Steam Deck is quite literally the epitome of that. So if I'm being honest, I was kind of shocked by some of the initial outrage with the difference in pricing between these two units. Because after learning of the Go 2 specs well in advance, I don't see how anyone could have expected it to be extremely competitive with the Xbox ROG Ally. I never expected that better hardware in such a key area and more RAM on top of that would somehow equate to the same MSRP. The Xbox ROG Ally advantage lie in its speakers, the smaller form factor, the slightly larger battery, and the AI processor element, which we're still waiting to fully understand its impact for real-world performance. But outside of that, I genuinely believe that the Legion Go 2 Z2E has the upper hand. I think it's the ultimate companion when you're gaming in more set conditions. If you're bouncing around and ripping and running all of the time, of course you'll want a smaller footprint. But there's never been an OLED screen at this size and this form factor that is this breathtaking, and yet somehow still delivering on critical performance enhancing features like VRR at 144Hz, but then a native landscape 1200p display. I don't care how or where you game, your gaming display is literally the window into the soul of your video games. And up until the Legion Go 2, for me, handheld gaming has always been incredibly fun and engaging. But in the back of my mind, I could never really shake the reality that while incredibly convenient, there was a lot I was sacrificing or leaving on the table from an immersive and visual standpoint versus what I'm able to experience when I can park in front of my TV or monitor for hours on end. No, the Go 2 is not replacing my LG C5 77-inch OLED display anytime soon, but it isn't a stretch to say that the Go 2 screen is so good that it feels like a quality shrunken down OLED gaming focused TV right in the palm of your hands. I think what I like most about the Legion Go controller detachment system is that it makes transition from handheld to your TV or monitor feel extremely organic and seamless. With fixed controllers, of course you can use console controllers when you're ready to game on another display. But I think there's a lot to be said for being able to leverage your existing controller mapping configurations. On top of that, being able to navigate the desktop interface from the comfort of your couch using the built-in trackpad is a huge advantage. And I highly encourage you not to judge the display solely on all of the YouTube videos that you see on the internet, because all of the compression and other variables taking place through processing on the camera and the lens in post just does not give you the full picture. Even if you have to pick up the Go 2 on a credit card and then return it soon after just to get that true real-world hands-on experience, that'll be so much more valuable than just going off of what you see online. Try doing that before you formulate your entire opinion based on internet videos, especially now that the Legion Go 2 Z2E is highly rumored to be shipping very soon with SteamOS pre-installed. Because I'm telling you, if that's done right with a second collaboration with Valve, as with the Legion Go S, the Legion Go 2 is going to become even more harder to ignore or dismiss. And as I said earlier on, I'm a strong believer in backing and supporting a company that fully goes about a collaboration the right way, with the right clear messaging leading up to its release. And as for the controllers, I know the Xbox ROG Ally has some buzzwords surrounding new haptic features for the triggers, but overall I've actually been enjoying the haptics more on the Legion Go 2. The Joy-Cons went from buzzy and somewhat annoying at times to having extreme accuracy and precision that pulls you deeper into your video games. They're not quite on DualSense or Switch 2 level, but they're making real strides considering that advanced controller haptics also has a good deal to do with developer support and proper implementation, something that will probably always fall short behind a locked console system. Definitely check out Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart or Until Dawn Remastered on the Legion Go 2 to get a real sense of what the controller haptics are capable of. Again, Lenovo definitely dropped the ball with the auxiliary port installed on the bottom of the console. I don't love the second USB-C port installed down there either, but the auxiliary port is just the most egregious. And I called this out before, but the angled screen on the Xbox Ally and the extremely loud face buttons is just something that I'm not a huge fan of. And I still don't understand why Asus continues to design their micro SD card reader at the top of the device near the heat exhaust vents after that whole debacle with the original Ally cooking people's micro SD cards. This wasn't a real issue for the original Go, but I'm happy to see Lenovo has now moved the card reader to the bottom of the device for both the Go S and the Go 2, just as with the Steam Deck. In spite of these flaws, you'll get an amazing handheld gaming experience with either of these devices. But as I said before, you probably shouldn't be buying either of these handhelds, in spite of any of the pros or any of the shortcomings. As it stands now, the Legion Go S Z1E is my 2025 pick for the vast majority of users. And as shown in performance, it really does hold its own against these new heavyweights. Add a bit of lossless scaling into the mix, and you'll have yourself a powerful alternative with a significantly reduced price tag. But if you're hell-bent on making bad decisions, or you've come into a bit of extra funds that will allow you to splurge a bit, in spite of the price differences, I say that an upgrade from the Legion Go to the Legion Go 2 is easier to justify versus an upgrade from the ROG Ally X to the Xbox ROG Ally X. Either way, they're both reckless decisions, but you know that some of us are still going to make them. But before I wrap, really want to know what handheld you're primarily driving right now as we close in on 2026. Are you still rocking the Steam Deck, an earlier model of the ROG Ally or the OG Go, or something else? And what in the world are your thoughts on the Aya Neo Next 2? Because at this point, things are getting laughably wild in this space. As always, thanks for watching and supporting the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.